Before I go into this video, I'd like to give you a spoiler warning. If you have not yet seen the movie The Dig on Netflix and you're still planning to watch it, then please watch this video after you've seen the movie. I don't want to spoil it for you. But with that said, let's get right into it. My name's Kaylee and today we're going to talk about Sutton Hoo in Suffolk, England. But we're not only going to talk about the location, the artifacts and the story behind the excavation, we're also going to look at the differences between the movie and real-life events. Located along the banks of the River Deben lies Sutton Hoo. And on the opposite bank is the harbour town Woodbridge, lying just 11 kilometers away from the North Sea. This river formed the path of entry into East Anglia during the end of the Roman imperial rule in the 5th century AD. But before we go and look at the excavations of the mounds, we first need to look into the history of the area. The area of Sutton Hoo has been inhabited since the Neolithic period, around 3000 BCE. Many pots were found in small pits near the hollows where trees were uprooted in the past. In the Bronze Age, timber roundhouses were built at Sutton Hoo. These roundhouses had thatched roofs and the walls were made with the wattle and daub method. A woven framework of wooden strips called a wattle is daubed in a sticky material, usually made of a combination of wet soil, clay, sand, animal dung and straw. Beaker-style pottery was used and the houses had a central hearth. The inhabitants cultivated barley, oat and wheat, and they had dug ditches into the grassland, dividing it into sections indicating land ownership. Over time, the soil became infertile, which was most likely the reason the inhabitants abandoned the settlement. In the Middle Bronze Age, cattle and sheep were kept on the plot of land enclosed by wooden stakes. During the Iron Age, the people living in the Sutton Hoo area started growing crops again. They divided the land into small enclosures known as Celtic fields. Celtic field is a name given by archaeologist O.G.S. Crawford for traces of early prehistoric agricultural field systems found in northwest Europe. For example, in Britain, Ireland, Belgium, the Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, France, Sweden and Poland. These fields themselves are not related to the Celtic culture in any way. They can date from the early Bronze Age until the early medieval period, and some are preserved as earthworks or soil marks. At Sutton Hoo, the use of narrow trenches imply the cultivation of grapes, and the patches of dark soil indicate the growing of big cabbages. The cultivation of the land continued into the Romano-British period until 410 AD. Several artifacts from this period have been found, including a fibula and some fragments of pottery. But during this time, the people of Western Europe were encouraged by the empire to maximize the use of land for growing crops, and the area around Sutton Hoo suffered soil loss due to depletion. Eventually, it was once again abandoned and overgrown. After the Romans left the area, the Germanic tribes began to settle, mostly the Angles and the Saxons. During this time, the River Deben had formed part of a busy trading and transportation network, and a number of settlements were established along the river. The Sutton Hoo Cemetery was constructed and in use between 575 AD and 625 AD, and the grave field contained approximately 20 burial mounds. Now that we know how the area has developed over the centuries, it's time to look into the excavations. The western end of Mound 1 has been dug away in medieval times. This made it so that when the looters dug into what they thought would be the center of the mound in the 1500s, they missed the real center. A pit dating from this time was dated by bottle shards left at the bottom, and it narrowly missed the burial and its contents. A mansion was built on the property of Sutton Hoo in 1910. And this property was bought in 1926 by Colonel Frank Priddy, a retired military officer. He passed away in 1934 and left a widow, Edith Priddy, and a young son, Robert Dempster Priddy. After the passing of her husband, Edith became very interested in spiritualism, which was a popular religious movement during that time. In 1937, Edith decided that she wanted the mounds on her property to be excavated, and through the Ipswich Museum she hired the services of Basil Brown in 1938. He was a self-taught archaeologist who worked full-time for the museum. In June 1938 she showed him the mounds and suggested he started his excavations with Mound 1, But because it has been disturbed by early grave robbers, the Ipswich Museum and Brown decided to open 3 smaller mounds, number 2, 3 and 4. Unfortunately, these mounds were robbed of their valuable items and only revealed fragmented artifacts. In Mound 2, Brown found a disturbed burial chamber, with unusual fragments of metal and glass artifacts and ship rivets. At the time, it was uncertain if these artifacts were Viking or early Anglo-Saxon. Under Mound 3 were the ashes of a horse and a man, a Frankish iron-headed throwing axe, objects from the eastern Mediterranean, a lid from a bronze pitcher, and fragments of a decorated bone from a jewelry box. Under Mound 4 were the cremated remains of a man, a woman, a horse, and possibly a dog, as well as fragments of gaming pieces made from bone. After these finds, the Ipswich Museum became involved in the excavations, and the finds became a part of the museum's collection. Basil Brown began excavating Mound 1 in May 1939. He was helped by Edith Pretty's gardener, John Jacobs, her gamekeeper William Spooner, and another worker on the estate, Bert Fuller. They started digging a trench on the east side of the mound, and on the 3rd day they discovered an iron rivet from a ship. Within the next several hours, more rivets were found in their original position. The size of the find became quickly apparent, as this has been one of the most spectacular archaeological discoveries in Britain. For weeks they painstakingly removed soil from the ship's hull until they reached the burial chamber. During this time, Charles Phillips of Cambridge University had heard rumors about the ship discovery. The Ipswich Museum curator Mr. Maynard took him to the site. The Ipswich Museum had many discussions with the British Museum, the Science Museum, and the Office of Works. The Ipswich Museum then handed responsibility over to the British Museum under the leadership of Mr. Phillips. They instructed Mr. Brown to cease his excavations until a team could be assembled, but Brown continued his work, which, looking back, might have saved the site from being looted. The team Phillips assembled included Welsh archaeologist William Francis Grimes, the archaeological officer of the Ordnance Survey Osbert Guy Stanhope Crawford, archaeologist Stuart Ernest Piggott, and archaeologist Margaret Guido, who at the time was known as Peggy Piggott, the then wife of Stuart. The photography of the ship's excavation was undertaken by Mercy Lack and Barbara Wagstaff. Among them were more friends and colleagues. You've heard me talk about a ship, but none of the original timber had survived. Only the shape of the ship was perfectly preserved, as well as many construction details of the ship. Nearly all of the iron rivets were in their original position, making it possible to measure the ship and thus helping identifying its origins. The ship was made of oak and had a length of 27 meters long, and at the widest point it measured 4.4 meters wide, and the keel was at a depth of 1.5 meters. The hull was constructed in a clinker fashion, with 9 planks on either side kept in place by the iron rivets. A clinker fashion build is a method of boat building where the edges of the hull planks overlap each other. This has been a seagoing vessel of excellent craftsmanship, but repairs being done in the past were visible. The decking, benches and the masts were removed as well. To get the ship in its current location, the heavy oak vessel had to have been transported from the river, up the hill, and then it was lowered into a pre-dug trench. Only the tops of the stem and stern posts would have been visible above the land surface. A body and artifacts were then placed inside the burial chamber before a large mound was constructed on top, covering the ship while rising above the horizon, being visible from the river. Unfortunately, the mound is no longer visible from the river due to a forest called the Top Hat Woods being in between. There was speculation in the start of the excavation of the burial chamber that this ship burial might have been a cenotaph. A cenotaph is an empty tomb or monument in honor of a person or a group of people whose remains lie elsewhere. In 1967, soil analysis was conducted at the site, and traces of phosphate were found indicating that a body had been buried there, but it had completely disappeared in the acidic soil. Markings in the soil indicated that a large coffin was placed in the burial chamber, measuring 2.7 meters long. The artifacts around the body indicate that the head laid at the west end of the wooden structure, which does make sense as east stands for the rising of the sun, thus new beginnings, and the west stands for the setting of the sun, saying goodbye to what once was. An iron lamp containing beeswax and an iron-bound wooden bucket and a bottle of North Continental manufacturing were close by. Archaeologist, curator and director of the British Museum Sir David Mackenzie Wilson has said that the metal artifacts found in the Sutton Hoo graves were work of the highest quality, not only in English terms but even in European terms as well. Long after the ship's burial, the roof collapsed violently under the heavy weight of the mound, compressing the ship and its contents into the earth. Let's take a look at the artifacts found in the burial chamber. And to start, let's look at the most famous one, the Sutton Hoo helmet. It was placed on the left side of the head, wrapped in cloths. The decoration with its panels of tinned bronze is directly comparable to that found on helmets from the burial sites in eastern Sweden. The main differences between the Sutton Hoo helmet and the helmets found in Sweden are the full face mask, the solid neck guard, the deep cheek pieces, and the Sutton Hoo helmet has an iron skull of a single vaulted shell. The English origin of the Sutton Hoo helmet has been suggested because of these features. It has parallels with the basic structure of English helmets, such as the Coppergate helmet found in York. Of course, the Sutton Hoo helmet was a product of way better craftsmanship, although the helmet had rusted in the grave and was shattered into tiny fragments when the chamber roof collapsed. The helmet needed to be restored through the meticulous identification and grouping of the surviving fragments before it could be reconstructed. Helmets are extremely rare finds in ancient burials. On the right side of the head was a set of 10 silver bowls placed upside down. They were most likely created in the Byzantine Empire during the 6th century. Beneath the bowls were 2 silver spoons, most likely created in the ancient Greek city Byzantium. The spoons bear the names of 2 apostles. One has the Greek lettering for the name Paulos, and the other has the name Saul. A theory suggests that spoons were a baptismal gift for the deceased person. On the right side next to where the body once was, they found a set of spears, tips, and 3 barbed Angan-type javelins. A wand with a small mount depicting a wolf was found nearby. A sword was found laying closer to the body. The pommel of the sword was a golden garnet inlaid cloisonné. Cloisonné is an ancient technique for decorating metalwork objects with colored material held in place and/or separated by metal strips of wire, usually gold. The sword was 85 centimeters long. The patterned welded blade was still within its scabbard. Attached to this and more closely to the body was the sword harness and belt. On the position where the upper body would have been, they found a great gold buckle, made from several separate pieces. The hollow body forms a hinged box with a triple lock mechanism. The intricate decoration made with a chip carving technique comprises a web of 13 snakes, predatory birds, and long-limbed beasts. They are hard to spot, but the creator included a sort of key to this puzzle. Different shaped stamps and alternating backgrounds give their bodies contrasting textures, thus enabling the viewer to trace each individual creature within the mass. They discovered 2 shoulder clasps, consisting of 2 matching halves, hinged upon a long removable chained pin. The surfaces of the clasps display panels of checker millefiori insets and interlocking stepped garnets, surrounded by Germanic-style 2-ribbon animals inlaid with garnet cloisonné and glass, with the designs of boars and snake-like creatures. On the upper body area, they made another incredible discovery: the lid of a leather purse which used to hold coins. The leather, of course, completely deteriorated, but 40 Frankish coins and 2 small ingots were found with the lid. 37 of the Frankish coins were from a different mint, and 3 of them were blank. This indicates a deliberately selected collection. The lid itself is remarkable, although the non-jewelry parts of the lid have completely decayed over time, and the lid is currently displayed with a replacement plate behind the metalwork. 7 gold garnet cloisonné and millefiori glass plaques were set into it, made with large and very small garnets deliberately used to pick out details of the imagery. The imagery displayed shows twinning images of a bird of prey swooping on a duck-like bird and a man standing heroically between 2 beasts. These images must have had deep significance to the Anglo-Saxons, but that's impossible for us to interpret. The lid used to hang by 3 hinged straps from the waist belt and was fastened by a gold buckle. The shoulder clasps and the purse lid seems to be from the hands of the same master craftsman, as it is possible one person made the entire suit of gold and garnet fittings discovered in the burial chamber as a single commission. The area where the lower part of the body was once situated was filled with various drinking vessels. This included a pair of drinking horns made from the horns of an auroch, which was a species of large cattle that inhabited Europe. It's the ancestor to modern-day cattle. The species has been extinct since 1627 AD. A set of maple wood cups with rim mounts and Van Dykes were found in the same area where they found a heap of folded textiles as well. Materials including textiles and metal objects were formed into packed heaps on the east side of where the body used to be. Within this, they discovered the extremely rare survival of a long coat made from ringmail. This coat was made of alternate rows of welded and riveted iron links. Near the coat were 2 hanging bowls, leather shoes, a cushion stuffed with feathers, folded objects of leather, and a wooden platter. An iron hammer axe with a long handle laid next to one of the heaps. This is a unique artifact and has been interpreted in many ways. It was approximately 75 centimeters long and the head was estimated to be around 20 centimeters wide. The wedge-shaped head is made up of a narrow blade, a hammer-shaped butt, and a rectangular shaft hole. The original weight of the object can be estimated to have been around 3 kilograms. There was a circular shield in the northwest corner. It was mounted with garnets and die-pressed plaques of interlaced animal ornament. Of course, there were more cups, combs made of antler, small metal knives, bowls, a large round silver platter, and even a bone gaming piece found inside the burial chamber as well. Here you can see a recreation of the burial items of the Sutton Hoo ship. The artifacts found in the burial chamber near the body have been identified as regalia. This points to it being the resting place of a king. The artistic and technical quality of the gold and garnet inlaid objects are absolutely exceptional and among the true wonders of Sutton Hoo. A confrontation happened between the Ipswich Museum and Philips due to the need for secrecy because of the multiple vested interests. The Ipswich Museum prematurely announced the discovery and reporters tried to get access to the site, so Miss Pretty had to arrange for 2 police officers to guard the site 24 hours a day. Miss Pretty decided to donate the treasure as a gift to the nation so that the discovery made on her property could be shared with everyone. The finds were packed and moved to London. When World War II broke out in September of 1939, the grave goods were put in storage to keep it safe. After the war ended in 1945, the Sutton Hoo artifacts were taken from the storage. Their nature was determined and the helmet was reconstructed and replicated. The replication you can see here. A team led by Rupert Bruce Mitford from the Department of British and Medieval Antiquities oversaw the reconstruction, conservation of the artifacts to protect them, and put on display to be viewed by the public. Analysis of the data collected showed that there were still many unanswered questions. As a result of Rupert Mitford's interest in excavating the previous unexplored areas of Sutton Hoo, a second archaeological investigation was organized. Between 1965 and 1971, work continued, led by a team from the British Museum. During this time, the ship was once again exposed, and unfortunately it was discovered it had suffered some damage because of the fact that it wasn't properly backfilled in 1939 due to the rushed nature. Thankfully, it was intact enough for a plaster cast to be made and a fiberglass shape to be produced. After this, they decided to destroy the ship's impression to excavate underneath. From my understanding, they didn't find artifacts below the impression and the mount was then restored to its pre-1939 appearance. In 1983, Martin Carver from the University of York was then appointed to run a third excavation season. So now we will take a look at the other mounts and the finds being made. They opened up Mount 2 again to see if it might contain more artifacts, and they sure did. There was a rectangular chamber measuring 5 meters long and 2 meters wide, with a body and grave goods inside. A small ship had been placed on top of this chamber in an east-west alignment before the mount was raised. A body was found to have been placed in the southwestern corner with the aid of chemical analysis of the chamber floor. The artifacts found included fragments of a blue glass cup, 2 gilt bronze discs with animal interlace ornament, a bronze brooch, a silver buckle, and a gold-coated stud from a buckle. The artifacts were not identical to that of Mount 1, but the association of the grave contents show ritualistic connections between these 2 burials. In Mount 5, Carver and his team found cremations deposited in bronze bowls, gaming pieces, small iron shears, a cup, and an ivory box. In earlier excavations in the 60s, they had already found 2 inhumations in Mount 5 accompanied by a pit with a skull. In Mount 6, they found cremations in bronze bowls, cremated animals, gaming pieces, a sword belt's fitting, and a comb. In Mound 7, they found yet again cremations in bronze bowls, gaming pieces, an iron-bound bucket, a sword belt's fitting, a drinking vessel, and the cremated remains of a horse, red deer, cattle, sheep, and a pig that had been burned with the deceased on a pyre. In the areas between mounds 5, 6, and 7, Carver found 3 more inhumations. One small mound held the remains of a child along with a buckle and a small spear. A man's grave included 2 belt buckles and a knife, and a woman's grave contained a leather bag, a pin, and a decorative clasp. The most impressive of the burials besides Mound 1 is Mound 17. It did not contain a burial chamber, but the remains of a young man and a horse were found in this mound. The horse would have been sacrificed for the burial in a ritualistic manner. The oak coffin in which the young man was laid to rest contained his pattern-welded sword and his sword belt with a bronze buckle with garnet cloisonné cellwork, 2 pyramidal strap mounts, and a scabbard buckle on the right side of his body. At the man's head were a leather and fire steel pouch. This contained roughly cut garnets and a piece of Millefiori glass. Around the coffin they discovered 2 spears, a shield, a cauldron, a bronze bowl, a pot, an iron-bound bucket, and some animal ribs. In the northwest corner of his grave they found a bridle, decorated with circular bronze plaques with interlace ornamentation. We've reached the part of the video where you would normally expect me to say that we've reached the end, but today is not that day. This is the part where we will look into the differences between the movie and real-life events. Of course, it should be noted that when a movie is based on true life events, this doesn't mean that it has to be exactly accurate. Especially when you remember the fact that the movie follows the book The Dig more closely than it followed real-life events.
What are they?
We're standing in someone's graveyard, I reckon. Viking?
You say the word, and I'll dig.
Let's start with the fact that Edith Pretty was portrayed in the movie by the wonderful Carey Mulligan, who of course is a lovely woman to look at, but she's in her mid-30s, while the real Edith Pretty at the time of the events in 1939 was in her mid-50s. Charles Phillips, the archaeologist, was played by Ken Stott, who's in his 60s, but at the time of the excavations in 1939, Charles Phillips was in his late 30s. Peggy Piggott in the movie was portrayed as inexperienced and mostly hired because of her light weight to not disturb the delicate site, although Margaret Gaido, who at the time was known as Peggy Piggott, was an experienced archaeologist in the field, having studied archaeology at the University of Cambridge and the University of London. In the movie, her husband Stuart Piggott was portrayed as much older and more experienced, and as a gay man. While in real life he was only 2 years older than his wife, they had met at university when they were both students, and his sexuality is unknown. In the movie, Peggy Piggott falls in love with Rory Lomax, the cousin of Miss Pretty, who was portrayed as the photographer at the site. But, as I said earlier, the photographs made at the site were mostly made by 2 women, Mercy Lack and Barbara Wagstaff, and many pictures were taken by OGS Crawford, who worked for the Ordnance Survey. The women were excluded from both the book and the movie for a romantic storyline to be created. In the movie, Basil Brown starts digging on Mound 2 and eventually gets buried alive under the dirt as the excavated walls collapse on top of him. In real life, this event never took place. This was a way to make the movie more compelling and thus more interesting to the viewer, adding a spiritualistic awakening. This is not the only event they used to spicen up the movie. In the movie, a Spitfire is seen spluttering and gliding in the air above the excavators before crashing into the River Deben. The pilot died during the crash in the movie, and the excavators are seen pulling his body out of the river. This storyline is largely invented, although a similar event did take place in real life, only a few years later. In real life, it wasn't a Spitfire, but an American B-17 Flying Fortress bomber, and this plane crashed late into the Second World War. Thankfully, in real-life events, the 2 pilots in this plane survived the crash, and no one from the excavation was even there to lend a helping hand in any way. In the movie, Charles Phillips and Basil Brown are portrayed as having a very difficult work relationship, and while in real life there was of course some tension between these 2 men, they worked incredibly well together and formed what National Trust experts describe as a relationship of collaboration and mutual trust. In 1940, in the first major publication of the Sutton Hoo dig, Phillips praised Brown as having commendable care and skill in excavating the ship. Sutton Hoo is the cornerstone in the study of art in Britain between the 6th and 9th century AD. The gold and garnet fittings show the fusion of earlier techniques and motifs by master goldsmiths in a new creative way. The examples used for this new art style came from the Irish, Pictish, Anglo-Saxon, Mediterranean and native British sources. The Sutton Hoo treasures represent the pre-Christian royal accumulation of precious objects from many different cultures. And with that said, you've reached the end of this video. If you enjoyed watching, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to see more of these kind of videos, and click the bell icon for notifications every time I upload. If you haven't seen my previous videos yet, then click the card in the upper right corner or click the link in the description down below. I'd also like to thank my Patreons, Richard, Barry, Floyd, Scott and NGC6543. And for now, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.